The tango is a dance of seduction, passion, and surrender. Sophia Hartwell learned this the hard way when she stepped into Rafael Mendez's private studio and discovered that some dances are more dangerous than desire itself. At 38, Sophia had everything that money could buy in Manhattan's Upper East Side: a penthouse apartment, a successful interior design business, and a marriage to Jonathan Hartwell, a prominent investment banker whose name opened doors across the city. What she didn't have was passion, excitement, or any memory of the last time her husband had looked at her like she was more than an elegant accessory to his successful life. The idea for dance lessons came during one of their obligatory charity galas, watching couples glide across the ballroom floor with a grace and intimacy that made Sophia ache with longing. Jonathan had declined to dance as always, claiming his bad back or an important call that couldn't wait. "You should take lessons," suggested her friend Caroline over champagne and forced smiles. "There's this instructor, very exclusive, very intense, Rafael Mendez. He teaches privately in Soho. All the sophisticated women are talking about him." Something in Caroline's tone made Sophia curious. "What kind of dancing?" "Tango," Caroline said, her cheeks flushing slightly. "Argentinian style. Very authentic, very passionate. He only takes certain clients, women who are serious about learning the true art of the dance." That night, Sophia stood in her marble bathroom, studying herself in the mirror. At 38, she was still beautiful. Blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, green eyes that had once made men stumble over their words, a body that expensive trainers and exclusive spas had kept toned and elegant. But when was the last time anyone had seen that beauty? When had anyone desired her for more than her social connections or her husband's wealth? The next morning, she called the number Caroline had given her. Monday's studio. Came a voice like aged whiskey, rich, smooth, with an accent that made even those two words sound like seduction. "I'd like to inquire about tango lessons," Sophia said, suddenly feeling foolish. "Private lessons." "Ah," the voice said, and she could hear the smile in it. "And you are?" "Sophia Hartwell." "Sophia," he repeated, rolling her name around like he was savoring it. "A beautiful name for what I imagine is a beautiful woman. Tell me, Sophia, why do you wish to learn the tango?" The question caught her off guard. I want to learn to dance. Properly." "No," the voice said gently. "The tango is not about learning steps. It is about learning to surrender, to trust, to feel the music in your soul, and let it move through your body. Why do you really wish to learn?" Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was something about his voice, his directness, that made her want to tell the truth. "I want to feel alive again." "Ah," Raphael said, and there was satisfaction in his tone. "Now we can begin. Tomorrow, 7 in the evening. Dress as you would for seduction, Sophia. The tango demands nothing less." The Soho studio was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building, accessible only by a narrow staircase that made Sophia feel like she was climbing toward something forbidden. The space itself was unlike anything she'd expected. Hardwood floors polished to a mirror shine, walls lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors, and lighting that was soft and golden, more suited to a boudoir than a dance studio. But it was the man waiting for her that made Sophia's breath catch. Rafael Mendez was nothing like the dance instructor she'd imagined. Tall and lean with dark hair, slicked back from a face that belonged in old Hollywood movies, he had the kind of masculine elegance that spoke of expensive suits and dangerous charm. His white shirt was unbuttoned, just enough to show a hint of chest. His black pants fitted perfectly to his athletic frame. "Sophia," he said, crossing the floor to take her hand and bring it to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and intimately seductive. "You are even more beautiful than your voice suggested." He was still holding her hand, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed and desired all at once. "Tell me about your marriage." The question was so unexpected that Sophia almost pulled her hand away. "I beg your pardon?" "The tango is about passion, about connection between man and woman," Raphael said, still holding her gaze. "To teach you properly, I must understand what you are missing, what you are seeking." Sophia felt her defenses crumble under his direct stare. We've been married 15 years. Jonathan is successful, stable, respected. But does he make you feel like this? Raphael asked, using his free hand to trace the line of her jaw with one finger. The touch sent electricity through Sophia's entire body, and she gasped softly. It had been so long since any man had touched her with such focused intention. I thought not, Raphael said with satisfaction. Come, let us begin to awaken what has been sleeping. He led her to the center of the floor, his hand on the small of her back, sending heat through the silk of her dress. The tango begins with the embrace, Raphael said, pulling her into his arms with practiced ease. In Argentina, we say the embrace is everything. It is where two souls meet and decide if they will surrender to the music together. Sophia found herself pressed against his chest, his arm around her waist, his hand holding hers with just the right amount of pressure. She could smell his cologne, something spicy and masculine that made her think of dark bedrooms and whispered promises. Feel my heartbeat, Raphael murmured, his mouth close to her ear. Let your body learn the rhythm of mine. The instruction was innocent enough, but the way he said it, the way his breath stirred the hair at her temple, made it sound like an invitation to something much more intimate. Now, Raphael said, as music filled the studio, passionate, haunting tango music that seemed to speak directly to something deep in Sophia's chest. Close your eyes and let me lead you. What followed was the most sensual experience of Sophia's life. Raphael guided her through the basic steps of the tango, but every movement felt charged with sexual energy. When he dipped her, his hand supported her back with such strength and confidence that she felt completely safe, surrendering to his control. When he spun her, she felt graceful and desired in a way she'd forgotten was possible. Beautiful, Raphael murmured as they moved together, their bodies finding a rhythm that felt natural, despite being strangers. You have passion in you, Sophia. I can feel it trying to break free, his hand on her back, his body leading hers through the intricate steps. The way he looked at her, like she was the most fascinating woman he'd ever encountered. It was intoxicating. Sophia felt herself melting into the dance, into his embrace, into the fantasy that she was desirable and passionate and alive. When the music ended, they were standing close together, both breathing heavily from the exertion and the intensity of the connection. Raphael's arms were still around her, and Sophia realized she had no desire to step away. How do you feel? Raphael asked, his voice low and intimate. Different, Sophia said honestly, like I've been awakened. Raphael smiled, a slow, satisfied expression that made her stomach flutter. This is only the beginning, Sophia. The tango has many secrets to teach you. Will you come back? Yes, Sophia said without hesitation. When can I come back? Tomorrow, Raphael said. Your body will be hungry for more by then. The next evening, Sophia found herself dressing with more care than she'd taken in years. She chose a red dress that hugged her curves, heels that made her legs look endless, jewelry that caught the light. When Jonathan absently asked where she was going, she mentioned dance lessons, and he grunted his approval without looking up from his tablet. At the studio, Raphael greeted her with the same intimate charm, but tonight there was something more predatory in his smile. Red, he said, taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation, the color of passion, of blood, of surrender. Perfect for tonight's lesson. What will we learn tonight? Sophia asked, already feeling her pulse quicken in anticipation. Trust, Raphael said, moving to put on music that was even more sensual than the night before. The tango requires complete trust between partners. You must be willing to follow where I lead, no matter how dangerous it seems. He pulled her into the embrace, and this time his hold was more possessive, more intimate. As they began to dance, Raphael guided her through moves that were more complex, more daring. He would dip her so low that she was completely dependent on his strength, spin her so fast that she felt dizzy and disoriented, then catch her against his chest with perfect timing. Trust me, he whispered during one particularly dramatic move where she was completely at his mercy. Surrender to me completely. The words sent a shiver through Sophia that had nothing to do with dancing. As the lesson progressed, she found herself pressing closer to Raphael during the embraces, letting her hand linger on his chest, meeting his intense gaze with growing boldness. You're learning quickly, Raphael said,
said, as they finished a particularly complex sequence. Your body is remembering what it means to be desired. I feel like I'm becoming someone else, Sophia admitted, still in his arms as the music faded. You are becoming who you were always meant to be, Raphael said, his hand tracing the line of her spine through her dress. Passionate, sensual, alive. When Sophia left that night, she felt like she was floating. Her body still hummed with the memory of Raphael's touch, his guidance, the way he'd made her feel beautiful and desired and powerful. At home, Jonathan was already asleep, snoring softly in their king-sized bed, completely unaware that his wife had spent the evening in another man's arms. Over the following weeks, Sophia's lessons with Raphael became the center of her existence. She rearranged her work schedule around their sessions, canceled social obligations to ensure she never missed a class, lied to Jonathan about where she was spending her evenings. Each lesson was more intense than the last. Raphael pushed her to attempt moves that seemed impossible, dips and spins and embraces that left her breathless and trembling. But more than the physical challenges, he was awakening something in her that had been dormant for years. Feel the music in your hips, he would murmur, his hands guiding her movements with intimate familiarity. Let it move through your body like desire. The tango is about seduction, he explained during one particularly intense lesson, his body pressed close to hers as they moved across the floor. The man pursues, the woman yields, but she also has the power to drive him mad with desire. Sophia found herself changing outside the studio as well. She walked differently, dressed differently, carried herself with a new confidence that came from feeling truly desirable for the first time in years. Colleagues complimented her glowing skin and renewed energy. Even strangers on the street seemed to notice her in ways they hadn't before, but it was Raphael's attention she craved most. The way he looked at her when she mastered a difficult move, the way his hands lingered on her body during corrections, the way he spoke her name like it was something precious and rare. You have become magnificent, Raphael told her one evening after a particularly passionate tango session. They were standing close together, both breathing heavily, his arms still around her waist. Your husband is a fool not to worship you every night. The comment should have made Sophia uncomfortable, but instead she felt a rush of gratitude that someone finally saw her worth. Jonathan barely notices me anymore, she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. Then he is blind, Raphael said, his hand coming up to cup her face. You are a goddess, Sophia. You deserve to be adored. That night, Raphael suggested they practice at his apartment instead of the studio. I want to show you how the tango is danced in Buenos Aires, he said. In the milongas, the dance halls where passion is not hidden behind proper technique. His apartment was a seduction in itself, dimly lit with candles filled with the scent of expensive cologne and something darker, more masculine. The hardwood floors were perfect for dancing, but the atmosphere was pure bedroom. In Argentina, Raphael said, pouring wine into crystal glasses, the tango is about more than dance. It is about desire, about the conversation between man and woman that happens without words. As they danced in his living room surrounded by candlelight and intimacy, Sophia felt the last of her resistance crumbling. Raphael's hands roamed her body with increasing boldness during the dance, his mouth close to her ear as he whispered instructions that sounded like invitations to sin. Feel how your body responds to mine, he murmured during one particularly close embrace. This is what you've been missing, what you've been craving. When the music ended, they were pressed together so closely that Sophia could feel Raphael's heartbeat against her chest. His dark eyes were intense with barely controlled desire, and she realized that the pretense of dancing had finally fallen away. Sophia, Raphael said, her name a question and a plea. Instead of answering with words, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed him. What followed was the most passionate night of Sophia's life. Raphael made love to her with the same intensity and skill he brought to dancing, worshipping her body like it was sacred, bringing her to heights of pleasure she'd never known were possible. You are so beautiful, he whispered against her throat as they moved together in his bed. So perfect, I could worship you forever. Sophia felt reborn in his arms, rediscovered as a sensual woman capable of inspiring such passion. When Raphael cried out her name as he climaxed, she felt like the most powerful woman in the world. Afterward, as they lay tangled in silk sheets, Raphael traced patterns on her bare shoulder and told her about his life in Buenos Aires, his passion for dance, his dreams of finding a woman who could match his intensity. I have been looking for someone like you, he said, his voice soft with something that sounded like love. Someone with your fire, your passion, your capacity for surrender. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. When was the last time anyone had talked about her capacity for passion? When had anyone seen her as anything more than a successful decorator and wealthy wife? I should go, she said reluctantly, but Raphael's arms tightened around her. Stay, he said, let me worship you the way you deserve. She stayed until dawn, making love with Raphael twice more, each encounter more passionate than the last. When she finally crept home, Jonathan was already at the gym for his morning workout, unaware that his wife had spent the night in another man's bed. Over the following weeks, Sophia's affair with Raphael consumed her completely. She saw him every day, sometimes for dance lessons, sometimes simply to make love in his candlelit apartment. Raphael was everything Jonathan wasn't: passionate, attentive, focused entirely on her pleasure and happiness. Leave him, Raphael urged one evening, as they lay together after particularly intense lovemaking. Come with me to Buenos Aires. I can show you a life of passion, of dance, of being worshipped as you deserve. The suggestion terrified and thrilled Sophia. She began to fantasize about a life with Raphael, about dancing in Buenos Aires, about being with a man who saw her as a goddess rather than a possession. But Raphael was playing a much more sophisticated game than Sophia realized. Unknown to her, he had been carefully documenting their relationship from the beginning. Hidden cameras in his studio and apartment captured every intimate moment, every passionate encounter, every whispered confession about her marriage and her desires. Rafael Mendez was not his real name. He was actually Carlos Vega, a professional seducer who specialized in targeting wealthy, unhappy wives. The dance studio was a front for an elaborate blackmail operation that had been running successfully for 3 years. His method was always the same: identify wealthy, neglected wives through social connections, seduce them through the intimate medium of dance, create an intense emotional and sexual affair, then use the evidence to extract money in silence. Sophia was his most successful target yet. Her husband's wealth, her social position, and her complete emotional surrender made her perfect for the final phase of his plan. The trap was sprung on a Thursday evening in December. Sophia arrived at Raphael's apartment, expecting another passionate encounter, but instead found him sitting calmly at his computer, uploading video files. Raphael, she called, confusion coloring her voice. What are you doing? He turned around, and for the first time since she'd known him, his expression was cold and calculating instead of warm and seductive. Hello, Sophia, he said, his accent suddenly less pronounced, his charm completely absent. We need to talk. Sophia felt ice form in her veins as she saw what was on his computer screen. It was footage from their first dance lesson, shot from an angle that captured every moment of their interaction, including her obvious arousal and attraction. What is this? She whispered, though part of her already knew. Insurance, Carlos said, dropping the Raphael persona entirely. You'd be amazed how much certain people will pay to keep videos like this private. Sophia's world crumbled as she realized the scope of his deception. Our entire relationship, it was all a lie. Not entirely, Carlos said with a shrug. The sex was real. Your desperation was real. Your willingness to betray your marriage vows was definitely real. He clicked through folder after folder of video files, each one documenting their affair in explicit detail. You were particularly enthusiastic, he noted clinically. These will make excellent leverage. You're blackmailing me, Sophia said, the words feeling surreal. I prefer to think of it as collecting payment for services rendered, Carlos said. I gave you months of passion, made you feel desired, awakened parts of yourself you'd forgotten existed. Surely that's worth something. Sophia sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the betrayal and her own stupidity. How much? $200,000, Carlos said. Transfer it to this account by Friday, and the videos disappear forever. Refuse, and your husband gets a very interesting email, Monday morning. And after I pay? Sophia asked. Carlos shrugged again. And this never happened. You go back to your boring marriage, and I find a new student. Everyone wins. Except for the part where you've destroyed my ability to trust anyone ever again, Sophia said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. That's not my problem, Carlos said coldly. You have until Friday, Sophia. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sophia left his apartment on trembling legs, her entire world shattered. The man she'd thought she was falling in love with was a criminal who'd been playing an elaborate con from the very first moment. Every passionate declaration, every intimate touch, every moment she'd thought they were connecting, had been a carefully orchestrated performance. But Sophia Hartwell hadn't built a successful design business by giving up when things got difficult. She also had resources that Carlos had underestimated. Instead of transferring the money, Sophia did what successful people do when they're in trouble. She hired the best help available. Within 24 hours, she had assembled a team that included a top private investigator, a cybersecurity expert, and one of New York's most ruthless attorneys. The investigation revealed that Carlos Vega had been running variations of this scam across multiple cities for years. He targeted dozens of wealthy, lonely wives, always following the same pattern: establish himself as a dance instructor, seduce vulnerable women through intimate lessons, document the affairs, then blackmail his victims. More importantly, Sophia's team discovered that Carlos had made a critical error. In his arrogance, he'd kept detailed records of all his victims, including financial information he'd gathered, and copies of all his blackmail videos. The evidence was stored on servers that weren't as secure as he'd believed. On Friday morning, instead of a money transfer, Carlos received a visit from FBI agents specializing in cybercrime and extortion. They arrived at his apartment with search warrants and evidence of a criminal enterprise spanning multiple states. Carlos Vega, Agent Martinez said as she placed handcuffs on the man Sophia had known as Rafael, "You're under arrest for extortion, wire fraud, and operating a criminal enterprise." As the agents led him away, Carlos looked at Sophia with something like respect. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. "You have no idea," Sophia replied. The trial made headlines across New York's social pages, but Sophia's legal team managed to keep the most salacious details private. Carlos was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, and his conviction encouraged other victims to come forward. The scandal did damage to Sophia's marriage, but not in the way she'd expected. Instead of destroying their relationship, it forced her and Jonathan to confront the distance that had grown between them. In couples therapy, they began to address the neglect and emotional abandonment that had made Sophia vulnerable to manipulation. Jonathan, to his credit, took responsibility for his role in their marital problems. "I was so focused on success that I forgot to cherish my wife," he admitted during one particularly difficult session. They rebuilt their marriage slowly, with genuine communication and renewed intimacy. Jonathan began taking dance lessons with Sophia, legitimate ones, with a female instructor and proper professional boundaries. A year later, Sophia reflected on her experience with a mixture of regret and gratitude. She regretted the betrayal, the lies, the months of living a double life, but she didn't regret rediscovering her own capacity for passion, even though it had come at such a cost. The Tango studio where it all began had been shut down, but sometimes Sophia still heard the music in her dreams. Not the memory of Carlos's manipulation, but the pure joy of movement, of feeling beautiful and desired and alive. She'd learned that passion could be weaponized, that vulnerability could be exploited, and that sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones who made you feel most beautiful. But she'd also learned that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, capable of fighting back and seeking justice, even when the stakes were deeply personal. The dance between predator and prey was over. Sophia had won,